Oh,
I thought it was like some Gmod shit or some AI.
That's real, bro. So what the is that? It was this doctor, William Bailey. He was a self-proclaimed doctor, and basically he ended up making this magic potion. That is what he called it, and it was called Radithor, which basically was just radium mixed with water.
The fuck is radium?
It's a very, very highly radioactive substance, bro.
Don't tell me he drinks it.
And supposedly it's supposed to cure anything that you're feeling, any pain, weakness in your body is supposed to kill it, also improve your sex drive. So this guy, even Byers, he ended up injuring himself. He was a professional golf player and he ended up injuring his arm, so it was hindering him from doing anything, and he was also losing ability in the bed. He started realizing that as he was using it, he was feeling benefits, and then he thought, if I feel like this, now imagine how it would be if I take more. So he's taking like 10 times more than the regular dose than what the doctor prescribed. Over time, he ended up getting sick, so he ended up giving himself cancer. He was thinking that by taking more of it, he was going to feel better,
But it just had the opposite effect.
he started feeling that his teeth were loose, and they ended up just popping out to the
my
point where
God.
he lost his whole teeth and his whole jaw. And a lot of people were taking this shit, bro. And it was because that guy Bailey, he was telling doctors, if you prescribe this to people.
She was murdered by an execution-style gunshot wound to the head. Yet the FBI reportedly told everyone that she died of exposure. The mysterious death of Annie Mae Aquash went unsolved for nearly 30 years, but for some reason, the truth is still being hidden. There's a new true crime docuseries called A Vow of Silence: The Assassination of Annie Mae Aquash, and everyone needs to stop what they're doing to watch it. Annie Mae was a First Nations activist and Mi'kmaq tribal member from Nova Scotia, and she played a major part of the American Indian movement. This series delves into her life and advocating for Native American rights. But when she disappeared in December of 1975, leaving behind 2 young children, a web of corruption and mystery would soon unravel, going much deeper than anyone at the time could have thought. Annie Mae's body was found 2 months later, and the FBI quickly ruled that she died of exposure. But after pushing for a second autopsy, Annie Mae was found to have been murdered by a gunshot wound to the head, leaving many questioning how something so horrific could seemingly go so unnoticed. This series explores how many people, including Annie Mae's family, believe that her death was the direct cause of someone much higher up than the people who would eventually be charged. Vow of Silence examines the historical issues that many Native Americans faced and still face to this day, but all from a marginalized perspective. Annie Mae's family is involved in this docuseries as well, honoring her legacy and documenting the ongoing fight for justice for missing and murdered Indigenous women. It lays out all of the facts in this mystery so you can decide for yourself. Watch Vow of Silence on Hulu to uncover the truth. What's your theory?
I got sexually assaulted by Joe Gatto, the Impractical Joker.
Joe Gatto, one of the stars of the TV show Impractical Jokers, has been accused of sexual assault. Now, according to the girl who posted the TikTok and shared her story about what allegedly happened, she's been talking about this for over a year and DMing celebrities trying to get someone to listen, but no one really paid attention until now. So according to Joe, completely by chance while having brunch earlier that day, and here's a photo from that chance meeting. So afterwards, she DM'd him, and eventually she got tickets to go out and see him that evening at his comedy show. She also shared videos and photos of the show itself, and then afterwards she got to meet Joe one more time. And here's where it gets weird. Here are some screenshots that allegedly show their conversations. You can pause to read them if you'd like. But according to her, eventually, after she had been drinking for a while, he invited her to come up to his apartment. Here's a screenshot showing that part of the interaction. Now, she hasn't shared with us exactly what happened when she got up to the apartment, but she did share this photo which allegedly shows the aftermath of the encounter. And she refers to this entire incident as a sexual assault and claims that she doesn't like to go back there in her mind and doesn't really like talking about what exactly happened. Now, we haven't received any response yet from Joe Gatto himself, but as a massive impact, growing disappointing. And I'll keep you guys updated if anything else happens in this case, because I'm sure there are going to be more developments.
Something absolutely horrific happened this Halloween. At around 11:15 p.m. on Thursday the 31st of October, a terrified call came into police. On the other end of the line, officers could hear a child's voice. She told authorities that her dad had been shot and killed at their home in Houston. Obviously, emergency services rushed to the scene and found the victim lying in a pool of blood on his garage floor. He had multiple gunshot wounds and was pronounced dead at the scene. The two children were inside of the house, and obviously, although they were completely traumatized, they were thankfully unharmed. There was actually a third child who usually did live in that house, but this child was thankfully staying with a relative on that night. Now, there was no murderer anywhere to be seen and no clues left as to who could have committed this crime. Police knew that if they were to try and hunt down this killer, they needed to ask local neighbors whether they had any Ring doorbell footage. Luckily, some neighbors had captured some disturbing images. One appeared to have captured a figure walking in the area in a Michael Myers Halloween mask around the time of the murder. So who could have committed this horrific crime and why? A homicide investigation is currently underway, but police had some interesting information about another family member. The mother of the children, who was separated from the dad, who is the victim in this case, was also murdered back in August. They believe it's possible that these two killings are linked. The children are now in the custody of their nan, but it's absolutely horrific that these three kids have been left without a dad or a mum.
These are twisted murder cases you've never heard of, and this is a massive trigger warning. The case that I'm about to explain takes place in the United States of America on August 29th, 2018. Dorothy Mae Neal was a 83-year-old woman who lived in Baltimore, and she was described as a nice woman, and her neighbors loved her. And despite her age, she was very independent and outgoing. In August 2018, neighbors noticed they haven't seen Dorothy in a couple of days. She was known to be active and wasn't the type to stay indoors all day. As a couple more days passed, they were worried that she might have passed away in her home, so they decided to check on Dorothy. They knocked on her door of her home, but there was no response, and her door was locked. Her neighbors began to get scared and called the police. Baltimore police made their way to Dorothy's home, but when they got there, they noticed something extremely strange. They saw what appeared to be small droplets of dried blood outside her home. They also noted there was no signs of forced entry and the door was still locked. The police then managed to get inside Dorothy's house, and once inside, they found her lying on the floor on her back. Dorothy was naked and was badly beaten and was also covered in blood. There was evidence that something brutal happened to her. Used condoms were found around her body, and police rushed to her side and saw that she was still alive but unresponsive. She was barely alive. Dorothy was then rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. The doctors tried everything, but Dorothy passed away shortly after arriving. Investigators then began to find out what happened to her, and it wouldn't take long for them to find the culprit. At the crime scene, police found a lot of evidence. Dorothy's bloody clothing was found, which the killer removed. There was 3 used condoms around where Dorothy was found. A broken lamp was also next to her, and it was covered in blood. It had been used to smash her head in. Whoever did this was someone she trusted. They had to be let into her home before they brutally attacked her and left her for dead. There was evidence that whoever did this was young, but I don't know what that means, as the police never said anything further. It was in September 2018 when the police arrested a 14-year-old male named Tyrone Harvin, and he had just turned 14. The police knew Tyrone, and he had a criminal past. Tyrone denied all allegations made against him and even said he didn't even know Dorothy at all. But he had a lot of evidence against him. Dorothy sometimes watched him, and this is why there was no forced entry. The condoms that were found were tested against Tyrone's DNA, and it came back a near perfect match. Also, the condom wrappers were tested for fingerprints, and the fingerprints matched Tyrone's. There was also someone else's blood at the crime scene, and it came back to be Tyrone's. An autopsy was then done on Dorothy's body, and police found evidence that she was sexually assaulted in a number of ways. And Tyrone had hit her so hard with the lamp that she had multiple fractures to her skull. The evidence was enough to charge Tyrone with murder. However, Tyrone continued to deny killing Dorothy. He told his mother that he didn't do it, and when she was speaking to the media, she said Tyrone was a caring young boy, and it makes no sense why he would hurt an elderly lady. Tyrone was charged as an adult due to the graphic nature of the crime. Investigators believed it was premeditated. It seems Tyrone was helping Dorothy with some chores around her house when all of a sudden he began to attack and force himself upon her, taking advantage of the fact that she was a vulnerable old woman. And on June 29th, 2022, now 18-year-old Tyrone was found guilty of Dorothy's murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison. This case is truly twisted, and for someone so young to do this to an elderly woman is just disturbing.
I visited Bohemian Grove last year, and let me tell you, it was crazy. If you don't know what the Bohemian Grove is, it's the place where the Bohemian Club meets every single year. It's basically a secret society / camp where all these powerful people from politics, business, and the entertainment industry head out into the woods for a private party. Now, many people have alleged that there are terrible things that happen here within these highly restricted grounds, and hidden camera footage has emerged from inside of the Bohemian campground that depicts rituals being performed by all of the members. The grove itself is extremely well hidden, and the entire area is shrouded with dark energy. I actually spoke to locals for my documentary that I filmed, and I even talked to a guy that used to work there. He frequently saw children inside of the grounds. Keep in mind that children are not officially allowed inside of this place. And the real story of the Grove is incredibly disturbing. If you want to see the footage that we recorded at Bohemian Grove and the moment that we got chased out of the area by security, I would highly recommend you go check out the documentary that I produced titled Exposing the Evil of Bohemian Grove, the Darkest Place in America. Right now, you can watch the entire thing on my YouTube channel for free, The Paranormal Files. The link to the video is in my bio. And I promise you, after you watch this full documentary, your entire worldview will change. And you will understand exactly what's happening there and why people refer to this place as being so evil.
You ever heard about a woman named Gabriela Rico Jimenez?
Nah, never.
All right, on August 3rd, 2009, there was a woman captured on camera outside a hotel in Monterrey. She was like screaming to like random people in the crowd and to police officers, saying stuff about cannibalism, a secret society.
Nah, this sounds trippy as fuck already.
A mí no me llevan hasta que esto no se aclare. Ustedes estuvieron ahí. Fueron a sacar una copia. Vaya que mi celular no cuesta.
So after that, she was arrested, and then every single news station were covering this. A lot of people thought they were just like some random lady who was just having like a manic episode. But what people found weird about this was the fact that Gabriella was a supermodel before. They remember her being on magazines. She wasn't obviously like as famous as Beyonce or whatever, but she did have a name for herself.
She was known.
After this situation, she was never seen or heard of again, and her entire career as a supermodel on the internet
Was deleted?
Purposely erased everything about her because they're trying to make us forget who she was. So if you search up her name, nothing's gonna pop up besides this specific video.
It's kind of weird the fact that she said all those things and was never heard from again. It makes what she said a little more like, if she was just some random ass crackhead, bro,
Why would they decide to cover it? Because a lot of people would just have manic episodes and say that shit.
she didn't do no crime, bro. She was just being fucking crazy in the street.
Another theory that somebody said that I saw like in the comments, maybe she wasn't a known model. Maybe she was
Fire Festival 2 is happening next year, apparently. So let's talk about Fire Festival because that was wild. Pablo Escobar's private island, private jets, and the most luxurious and exclusive music festival you could have ever imagined. That's what people were promised. The reality of the ill-fated Fire Festival couldn't have been more different. So let's talk about what actually happened at Fire Festival, and I've gone into loads more juicy details on the podcast The Bourne Investigation. In 2013, Billy McFarland founded a company called Magnesis. It was an exclusive members-only club, and this is how he met Ja Rule. They built another business together called Fire Media. In order to promote this business, which was effectively like a talent booking app, they decided to put on a music festival. They got a bunch of influencers involved, like Hailey Baldwin, Kendall Jenner, etc., to promote this festival, and it was really, really successful in promoting it. Tickets started flying off the shelves. The tickets were so expensive, though. Some promised private yachts, a full crew included, and private chefs. Some tickets were like $25,000 per person. The team ended up booking talent like Major Lazer and my favorites Blink-182 to perform at the festival. However, the island that they planned to host this event on had less than ideal infrastructure. The Wi-Fi was sketchy, loads of things started going wrong, Billy fired the catering company. It just turned into a bit of a mess. They also spent a lot of money. There were rumors that they had already spent $4 million on just booking the artists alone. Money was running out and they started to realize that they'd overpromised. There weren't adequate toilet facilities, let alone enough food and water to feed everybody that was attending. Time and money was running out, and in order to try and pull this off, Billy decided to try and just squeeze more money out of people who'd already bought tickets, even though they only had these like leftover hurricane disaster relief tents for these people, not the luxury villas that they'd been sold. Needs. They then tweeted stating that due to circumstances beyond their control, inbound flights have been cancelled. Unfortunately, though, loads of people had already turned up on the island. Cue the confusion and chaos. People who attended the festival said that when they showed up, there was just absolutely no information, nobody telling them where they should go. Meanwhile, the campsite was absolute horror. It had chucked it down with rain on the lead up to the festival, so everything had got completely soaked. Hours and hours later, as the sun was going down, Billy McFarland stood on a table and basically just told everyone it was a bit of a free-for-all. He said no matter what ticket you purchased, you need to just go and run and grab a tent. So that's what people did. People were pushing and shoving and just acting like animals, to be honest, and scrambling to get their luggage and tents. This tweet of a cheese sandwich went viral, which just absolutely summed up the entire festival. It really made me laugh because the caption was moaning about how awful the food was, and it does look like an awful cheese sandwich, but part of the caption was moaning that there was no salad dressing, and I just thought the salad dressing is the least of your concerns. Organisers cancelled the festival, but it was too late for a lot of people that were already there and were now stranded on an island. There weren't enough flights to accommodate taking everyone home straight away, and many people were locked in the airport with no food or water. I think the sad thing about Fire Festival is the local people who were really taken advantage of and put so much time and effort into trying to make this festival happen, and they ended up not getting paid, and in some instances had even spent their own savings to try and cover some of the funds. Days after the festival concluded, a $100 million lawsuit was filed against the fire team. They were accused of fraud, amongst other things. Billy was arrested in June 2017 for wire fraud. Now, he was let out on bail, but he didn't stop there. He helped create a scheme called NYC VIP Access, which promised to sell these people discounted tickets to the Met Gala and Taylor Swift meet and greets. They didn't have these tickets to sell. In 2018, Billy was given 6 years in prison and was released in 2022. Now, shockingly, he's now out and is promising a Fire Festival 2 in 2025. I can't wait to see what happens with this. Now, I know that a lot of things wrong, and it is really sad for the local people, and I feel really bad for these people who have been scammed by this man. However, there's just something really likable about Billy McFarland. I can't quite put my finger on it. I feel maybe this is why people get so charmed by him, because he is a likable character, even though he's done a lot of things wrong. Like I said, I go into a big deep dive on my podcast about this, so please head over there if you're interested.
This teenage boy was brutally dismembered and tortured, and this is a massive trigger warning. This case takes place in Ireland on January 12th, 2020. Drogheda is a port town in Ireland, and Keane Woods was born there on February 2nd, 2003. Growing up, his favorite thing to do was drive his dirt bike around, but in his early teenage years, he started involving himself in petty crimes. And in 2018, he turned to organized crime when he was just 15 and got the reputation as a very violent individual. January 12th, 2020 started out as a normal day for the Woods family, but by the time the afternoon came around, everything had changed. Keen was missing and nobody could get a hold of him. The following day, his sister posted on Facebook asking if anyone knew where her brother was. The last time Keen was seen was on Sunday afternoon near his home. That day, Keen called his mother for some money so he can get a taxi home. And since then, his family and friends couldn't get a hold of him. His family then reported him missing to the police. When the police took a deeper look at Keen's history, they realized his family had a good reason to worry. Just days before Keen disappeared, a video was posted online by a local criminal, and in this video, the man made numerous threats to kill 17-year-old Keen. The threats were graphic and involved words like abduction, murder, and dismemberment. At the time, Drakeda was in the midst of a gang feud, and by the time Keen reached his teenage years, it escalated to full war, and Keen was a part of the gangs. He became involved in one of the dealing gangs right after the same time when the rivalry with a competing gang started to heat up. Keen's group carried weapons, and they weren't afraid to use them. They also enjoyed making bombs, which they used to attack their opponents' hideouts. And Keen did a bunch of awful things. This one time, he threw a petrol bomb inside the home of a boy who owed the gang money, and Keen told them he would burn them alive in their beds and claimed he didn't do it right the first time. Not long after this, he was arrested and charged with the possession of illegal substances. There's also reports that Keen tortured and killed a woman's cat, since the woman owed him money and she couldn't pay it back on time. These are the things that gave him the reputation of being a dangerous, violent young man. On the Monday, just a couple hours after Keen's sister posted asking for help to find him, a man walking down the street in East Dublin came across a bulky bag. And when he opened the bag, he was met with a horrifying sight. Inside were multiple dismembered human limbs and flip-flops. The following morning at 1:30 a.m., officers responded to reports of a burning vehicle. And when they put out the fire, they found a human head and two hands entangled in the burnt wreck. DNA tests then proved that the heads, hands, and limbs all belonged to Keen. The flip-flops did not belong to him, but in the wake of his murder, they were interpreted as a threat to the gang he used to run with. It turns out, weeks before Keen's murder, a 35-year-old man from the opposing gang was attacked on the street and was wearing a pair of flip-flops that were stolen during the attack. Someone from Keen's gang then posed for a photo with the flip-flops and posted the photo online with a caption mocking the guy they belonged to. The man who owned these flip-flops was Robbie Lauer. Now, the murder and dismemberment of a teenager might seem dramatic for the loss of just some flip-flops, but for those who knew Robbie Lauer's reputation, it was exactly his style. Robbie was a hitman and was a member of the gang known as the Anti-Maguire faction. He became the prime suspect in the murder of Keen. He was also the prime suspect in a number of other killings. But despite his violent record, he was released from prison just 1 month before Keen's murder. Robbie was then tied to Keen's death when one of his associates pointed authorities in the direction of the house where the teenager had been murdered. Gerald McKenna was the owner of the home, and he told the police Robbie threatened to kill him and his children and turn them into minced meat if he didn't clean up the crime scene inside his home. But when he arrived home after the killing of Keen, there was so much blood that he couldn't clean up all the evidence. Keen's family was devastated by his death and the way his body had been so gruesomely dismembered and spread out. All they had was his head, hands, and limbs. There was hopes the rest of him would be found so they can lay him to rest intact, and 3 months later in April 2020, the final pieces of Keen's body was found in his hometown. And in the months it was out there, it had been eaten quite a bit by animals. Keen was suspected of playing both sides of the gangs, and this is why he was targeted for murder. News then came out on how Keen died when two men were arrested. Rival gang members Paul Crosby, aged 27, and Gerald Cruz, aged 49. It turned out the day Keen had gone missing, Paul Crosby had met with him. Keen trusted Paul due to him playing both sides of the gangs. They met outside a shop in town, and Keen got into the car with him and Gerald, before being driven to the house where he would be murdered. Keen was tortured with power tools by the killer and stabbed multiple times in the torso. It's believed the gruesome murder and torture was filmed, intended to be used as an intimidation to the rival gang. And it's believed the footage is out there somewhere, but I couldn't find it and it hasn't been confirmed by the police. Keen's body was then dismembered with the power tools. There was no evidence that Paul Crosby and Gerald Cruz were present at the time of the murder, but they were the ones who lured him to his death. Robbie Lauer was never arrested or charged. The opportunity for justice was missed when Robbie was killed in a gang shooting not long after Keen's torso was discovered. Paul Crosby and Gerald Cruz were charged in relation to the murder of Keen. Paul was sentenced to 10 years and Gerald was sentenced to 7 years. Also, Gerald McKenna, the man who owned the house Keen was killed in, received 4 years since he attempted to get rid of evidence.
He disappeared after his car was seen swerving across the highway. Some witnesses say that no one was driving it, but others claim to have seen someone else not matching his description jump out of the passenger seat and run into the woods. This is the mysterious disappearance of Logan Schendelman, and nothing is more bizarre to me than when someone goes missing after crashing their car. There are so many cases like this. It seriously needs to be studied. So 19-year-old Logan was last seen on May 19th, 2016. He lived with his grandma and sister in Tumwater, Washington, and that morning he told his grandma that he would likely be away for the entire weekend. Logan never knew his dad and was raised by his grandma pretty much all of his life, even though his mom lived close by in Olympia. His grandma said that on that morning, Logan seemed nervous, which wasn't like his usual self. He said that he had an epiphany about himself, and when she asked him what it was, he said that he couldn't really explain it. She said that they would talk more about this later that night, and then they both went off to work, but this would be the last time that she would ever talk to him. At around 2 p.m. a day later, multiple people started calling 911 after seeing Logan's car swerve across 3 lanes on I-5 near Tumwater and Maytown and Thurston County. People driving by said that it appeared that no one was driving the car, but eventually the car crashed into the center median, and this is where this case gets bizarre. Several people said that they saw a white man with either brown or red hair jump out of the passenger seat and then run into the woods along the interstate. When police arrived, they found Logan's car abandoned near exit 95, but no one was inside. This was about 20 miles from his home. All of his personal belongings were still inside the car, including his wallet, driver's license, and phone. They initially searched for roughly 6 hours in the surrounding woods, but nothing was found or stood out, so they had his car impounded. Meanwhile, Logan's grandma had no idea what was happening until later that night when Logan never returned home. It wasn't totally uncommon for him to not come home for a day or two being a young kid, but by the next day she had a feeling that something was really wrong. So she ended up tracking Logan's phone to where it last pinged, which was in Olympia. So she figured that he was just visiting his mom who lived in that area. I didn't even know that this was legal, but apparently the Thurston County Police Department was closed for the weekend. So Logan's grandma had to wait 2 days to report him missing. When she did though, the police told her everything that had happened a few days prior. How witnesses saw his car swerving across the interstate and how his car was impounded later that day after it crashed. This was complete news to her, and this is when she was given back all of his personal belongings. But with all of this information, she was able to report him missing. Logan's uncle, who was a retired Thurston County sheriff, kicked off the search for him, and it was pretty massive and intense. They searched a 2-mile radius around where his car was found, and they specifically focused on the woods alongside the interstate since that's where someone was last seen running into. Authorities brought in cadaver dogs, and they searched by land and air, but absolutely no trace of Logan was ever found. It was like he vanished into thin air. It wasn't until after his disappearance gained some traction on the news that more witnesses came forward, but what they said only adds more mystery to this case. On the morning of May 20th, a witness said that she saw Logan with 2 white men standing at the back of his car. It was parked on the right shoulder of the interstate near where it would eventually be found. She said that as she was coming home that night, she saw his car in the exact same location. Only this time the hood was up and no one was there. At this point in time, it didn't look like the car had crashed yet, which is bizarre because others reported that earlier that day is when it did in fact crash. She described one of the men with Logan that day as around 6 feet tall, had blonde hair and a bowl cut, and was wearing a tank top with jean shorts that were too small for him. The other guy she described as having shoulder-length blonde hair and was wearing a flannel with jeans. Authorities later released a sketch of what one of the men may have looked like, but as of today, their identity remains a mystery. Adding to the creepiness of this case is the fact that later that night, the same night that Logan's car was found, there were sightings of a naked teenager in the area. But again, nobody knows who this was, and it was never really investigated. So police started combing through Logan's phone records, which showed him traveling on I-5 heading south that morning. But then for reasons unknown, he turns around and heads back for a little bit before turning back around, eventually stopping where his car was found. Nobody knows if Logan was even in the car that day with his phone or if it was stolen. And it's just odd that someone who very obviously does not match his description was seen in the passenger seat. Who was that and what was he doing? It doesn't make sense to me that multiple different people said that it appeared that no one was driving the car. That is so bizarre to me. Police also discovered that just days before he disappeared, Logan texted a woman that he met on a dating app saying, quote, "I hope I survive this week." End quote. Why he said that, no one knows. As of today, Logan remains missing, but there are a few theories as to what could have happened to him. One theory is that he suffered some sort of mental breakdown after smoking. According to his grandma, she knew that at this time Logan had been smoking and it wasn't anything crazy, but she did worry about him doing this because it seemed to make him a little paranoid at night. He was also going through some personal things, like not really knowing what to do with his life. Logan was a really popular kid who attended Tumwater High School. He was a model student and a star athlete on the football team that everyone loved. But at the end of his senior year, Logan was at a party where a girl made racist remarks to him, and none of his friends stuck up for him, which really hurt him. It affected him so much that he completely cut off his entire friend group, and he made a last-minute decision to enroll at WSU in Pullman, which is over 300 miles away. He went there for a year before deciding to move back in with his grandma and sister in Tumwater. He worked a couple of jobs and stayed relatively busy. Some believe that with all of these sudden changes in his life, mixed with him smoking, that he had some sort of mental break, which caused him to tell his grandma that he had an epiphany that morning. And while this might make sense, it still doesn't explain where he is, or why so many different people saw someone that wasn't Logan driving his car that day. The descriptions are just so far off from what Logan looked like. And it wasn't just one person that saw this, it was multiple people, and it was in broad daylight. Another theory is that Logan's sister's boyfriend might have had something to do with his disappearance. Her boyfriend had recently moved into the home with them, and Logan and him reportedly didn't get along. Logan's other family members recall him saying that this boyfriend was a problem, but he wouldn't elaborate more, saying that it seemed like Logan was scared to talk about it. This boyfriend does have a criminal history, but after taking a polygraph and passing, police ruled him out as a suspect. Logan's family has since hired a private investigator, but no trace of Logan has ever been found. Unfortunately, the situation was not handled properly, and since his car was impounded that day, it was never processed by a crime lab, so all potential evidence was either lost or unusable. This is one of the most bizarre cases that I've ever heard of, and it is still unsolved. The fact that so many people go missing after crashing their car is so scary to me. I would do anything to find out what actually happened to them. Whatever happened to Logan that day remains a mystery 8 years later.
However, according to the phrase, you can't make this stuff up, might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
We're asleep, and she gets up to go to the bathroom, and I'm like, oh man, I have to go to the bathroom too. So I'm going to go to the bathroom in the main bathroom outside the room. I go out, I come back in, and I'm like, why'd you turn my light on my side of the bed? Like, it's 12, we're going to bed. Like, we're in bed. She's like, I didn't do it. I thought you did. I'm like, okay, well, somebody's trying to get our attention. My phone rings. It's my little sister. She says, hey, Bob, sorry, are you awake? And I'm like, I am now. I go, my light just came on. She goes, that's why I was calling you. She said, is Nicole there? I'm like, yeah. She put her on speaker. She said, Nicole, I don't want to get personal, but did your mom have miscarriages before you? And she's like, yeah. She goes, I'm seeing 3 people in the room right now trying to get your attention. And they're your 2 brothers and your sister that weren't born.
There's actually a dark, terrifying origins to the Amber Alert. This happened in 1996 in Arlington, Texas. And it was a little girl called Amber Hagerman, who was 9 years old. And she was riding her bike at her grandparents' house along with her brother Ricky. Next to the grandparents' house was a supermarket, which was abandoned. Basically, they're riding their bike there, having fun and all. The little brother decided to go back to the house. So she stayed at the parking lot. That's when a black pull-up truck pulled up to her. A man got out of the truck, grabbed Amber, threw her inside the truck, and he dipped immediately. Now, luckily, a witness was able to, see it happen from his backyard. So he called the cops immediately. The cops showed up pretty fast, bro, like within minutes. It was pretty fast. So there was a huge search for Amber all over Texas, basically, hoping that they could find her and see who abducted her. Even with all that happening, bro, like they still couldn't find her. About 4 days later, there was a man who was walking his dog at midnight.
Haven't seen this photo on the internet as of late. This is just moments before 12-year-old Emma Brown took her gun and used it on her father and then herself. Last September, Emma and another 12-year-old friend devised a plan to murder Emma's family and her pets and then run away to Georgia together. Shortly after this photo, she then proceeds to shoot her father in the stomach and then run toward her driveway to take her family car to meet with her friend about 230 miles away. It's believed in this moment that Emma might have panicked and then shot herself in the process. The thing that's raised a concern is, as of right now, Emma's friend, who hasn't been publicly identified, is believed to have planned the entire ordeal. One of the biggest discussions as of late is that Emma's family had no idea how her and her friend had actually met, but she has been arrested and charged with a conspiracy to commit murder. The father did end up surviving the incident, but now conversations are being struck throughout the entire internet about whether or not parents know who their children's friends are. Police have also raised concerns and reports blaming social media for this occurrence. So the question now is, was this a preventable incident?
He was friendly and he was nice and he was so funny. He was so funny. He would always have me laughing. We used to play this game called Kick the Can, and he was the fastest runner, so we always wanted to be on his team.
Richard's friend Patricia found him kind and caring.
If we wanted to take a shortcut to school, we had to cut through this really tough neighborhood. And he always used to wait for me, sitting on a little pony wall, and then he would walk me to school. It was always safer not to be in twos, I guess. He used to sit in back of me in 5th grade. And I remember that he would poke me in the back. And every time he would poke me, I would jump up. And so that time that he kept poking me, I turned around very upset. And I said, hey, stop. And I remember him like slumping over and then just hitting the floor on the side.
He would have seizures. He would be shaking. We knew he was sick.
Third murder, which is the second incident, okay? I'm in line to get my record sealed, right? Thursday night, I killed her. I took off Friday. I didn't go to work. I called in sick, took CTO, all right? Dismembered her body, got rid of her body, but kept her head in her hands because they're identifiable. They're highly identifiable. I kept those at the apartment, okay? That Friday night, Thursday night, I took her. Friday morning, she was dismembered. Friday night, she was disposed of, right? Saturday morning, I left, right? And I wasn't satisfied that I took the head along in the hands, but I couldn't put them someplace that I could be sure they would be dug up by an animal or just be somewhere. It's scary going out there trying to bury somebody or dispose of body parts in a community or out even in the boonies where you don't know where you're at and who can come up at any moment. I had some real close calls there where people had come out of nowhere. And if a body's found and they remember this beige-looking car sitting there the night, that's evidence. So it was very, very hard to get rid of this stuff.
For the record, you are guilty of killing many women and girls.
Yes. Yes, that's true.
Ted, how did it happen? Take me back. What are the antecedents of the behavior that we've seen? So much grief, so much sorrow, so much pain for so many people. Where did it start? How did this moment come about?
I grew up in a wonderful home with two dedicated and loving parents, one of 5 brothers and sisters. But as a young boy, and I mean a boy of 12 or 13, certainly, that I encountered outside the home again, the local grocery store, the local drugstore, the softcore pornography, what people call softcore. As young boys do, we explored the back roads and sideways and byways of our neighborhood, and oftentimes people would dump the garbage and whatever they were cleaning out of their house, and from time to time we'd come across pornographic books of a harder nature than more graphic, you might say, more explicit nature than we would encounter, let's say, in your local grocery store.
2022, the town of Slaughter, Louisiana, was shaken by the death of 36-year-old Lacey Fletcher. Lacey suffered from a medical condition known as locked-in syndrome, making her almost completely paralyzed. Due to her medical condition, Lacey spent all of her life at home, as she began to develop some degree of Asperger's syndrome. Lacey's parents were her caretakers, although they neglected that responsibility and treated Lacey inhumanely, leaving her to relieve herself on the same couch that she spent most of her life. Lacey's neighbors stated that the last time they saw her in public was 15 years before this incident. At the time of her death, Lacey weighed 96 pounds and had contracted COVID-19. On January 3rd, 2022, Lacey was found dead in a couch covered in feces and urine. It was believed that she was in that same spot for years without being catered to. Her body was covered in ulcers, her hair matted and filled with maggots. Her parents, Sheila and Clay Fletcher, were charged with second-degree murder and detained for the severe chronic neglect. Despite all of this, they pleaded not guilty and were released on bail. Sheila and Clay Fletcher will begin trial on June 19th, 2023.
This influencer's body parts were found in pots of human soup just last month. On the 15th of February, 28-year-old model Abby Choi posted a beautiful photo on her Instagram. She had no idea of her horrific fate less than 2 weeks later. On February the 25th, 2023, police made a horrifying discovery. A splatter-proof makeshift butcher's workshop was found in a rented 3-story home. Inside of the home, they found 2 human legs in a fridge and Abby's decapitated head in a soup pot. Alongside the head, carrots and radishes were also in the process of being cooked. Minced human meat was also found at the scene. In the rented flat, police found a homemade butcher's shop equipped with meat grinders, chainsaws, and meat cleavers. Abby's handbag was also found at the scene, including her ID, which helped to identify her. Heartbreakingly, Abby was a mother of 4 young children. Police in Hong Kong have charged Abby's ex-husband, Alex Kwong, his father and brother with the murder. It's alleged that the 3 men rented an apartment where they'd meticulously planned the murder. It's also alleged that the motive for the killing was a family dispute over money. Abby's children are now being looked after by her mother.
Yeah. And you asked me to come here from California because you had something you wanted to say. It is not just an interview with a man who's scheduled to die tomorrow morning. I'm here and you're here because of this message that you're talking about right here. You really feel that hardcore pornography and the doorway to it, softcore pornography, is doing untold damage to other people and causing other women to be abused and killed the way you did.
Listen, I'm no social scientist, and I haven't done a survey. I mean, I don't pretend that I know what John Q. Citizen thinks about this. But I've lived in prison for a long time now, and I've met a lot of men who were motivated to commit violence just like me. And without exception, every one of them was deeply involved in pornography, without question, without exception, deeply influenced and consumed by an addiction to pornography. There's no question about it. The FBI's own study on serial homicide shows that the most common interest among serial killers is pornography.
That's true.
And it's real. It's true.
Ted, what would your life have been like without that influence? You can only speculate.
Yeah.
911, where's your emergency? I just killed someone. 100, Route 46. What do you mean you just killed someone? Exactly what I said. I'm armed and dangerous. Where are you? You know what? I'm armed, I'm dangerous, send the cops out. I'm in a parking lot, I can see from every angle. I will shoot at anyone who approaches the car. How many people did you hurt? You know, I'm not in a condition to talk. Okay, can you at least tell me what city you're in so I can send the police out there? Mountain Lake. You're in Mountain Lakes? Yeah. How many people did you kill? Just one person? Just one person. Just one person? I'm reloading right now. I'm going to shoot at anybody that approaches the car. Okay, that's not a problem, sir. I'd advise you not to reload and do that, but... What's your name? You just hung up on me.
10-year-old serial killer. Viewer discretion is advised. This is Mary Bell, and she could easily be one of the most sadistic murderers in history, even though she was only 10 years old. Mary allegedly grew up being abused, and her mother would even sell her to other men at the age of 5. All of this abuse fueled this anger inside of her, and she had to find some sort of way to release it. On May 11th, 1968, Mary Bell was playing with a little 3-year-old toddler, and he mysteriously fell off of an air raid shelter. This was the start of her violent outrage. Just 2 weeks later, on March 25th, 25th, the boy Martin Brown's body was found dead inside of an abandoned building. It was later discovered that Mary lured this little boy into this abandoned building and strangled him with her bare hands. 2 years later, Mary then strangled a 3-year-old boy and carved the letter M into his stomach with a razor blade. And then she used scissors to cut and mutilate the body. Mary eventually confessed to this by writing notes because she was bragging about it, and the police arrested her. Here's the crazy thing. She was arrested and released just a couple years later, and today she could possibly still be alive. One of the terms for her confession was that after she was released, her name would be changed and everything. The latest information we have of her is pretty much she had a daughter when she got released, and nobody knows where she's at now. So what do you think? Do you think she should be forgiven because she was a child, or do you think that fire is still inside of her waiting to strike again? Let me know in the comments down below, and make sure to like and follow for more videos.
One of the strangest missing persons cases I've ever seen revolves around someone that might not even exist. Let me explain. In 1989, a local Chicago television station called WMAQ was wrapping up their regularly scheduled television for the night, when all of a sudden the audio was cut and the image on screen was changed to a strange missing persons panel. The image of the individual shown was too low quality to make out any details, and no information other than the woman's name, Joanna Lopez, were given. The broadcast wouldn't be too out of the ordinary if it wasn't for the fact that she was never mentioned anywhere again. And when people tried to find her, they found no records of a woman named Joanna Lopez in Chicago, even with police filings. So, who was this woman in the broadcast? And how did a missing persons panel for her end up on the news? Well, when the news agency was asked about the panel, they claimed it was sent by an anonymous person, which leaves us with the most likely answer being that it was a prank or an alternate reality game. And as for who was actually in the photo, the lead seems to be a woman by the name of Rachel Lopez. A photo of her was found in a West Chicago yearbook from 1990. And although she has a different first name than Joanna, the fact that they look so similar and share a last name leads many to believe that she could be the one in the photo. Sadly though, it seems like we may never know for sure, as no one has been able to contact the woman in the yearbook.
2007, Knoxville, Tennessee was rocked by the brutal murder of 21-year-old Shannon Christian and 23-year-old Christopher Newsom. Shannon and Christopher were headed to a party on the night of January 6th. When they didn't show up to the party, the couple's friends started texting and calling them, but received no response. Around 11 p.m. that evening, a couple of their friends went to Shannon's apartment to see if they were there. Shannon and Christopher were not at the apartment, and they were unable to locate Shannon's SUV. It turns out that the couple were victims of a carjacking and kidnapping. The couple was taken to a rental home where they essayed, tortured, and murdered. A witness arrived at work around 12:30 a.m. on January 7th. He noticed that the lights of the rental home were on, and the home seemed quite busy for that time of night. The witness later observed a white 4Runner slowly drive by him with 4 men in the car. Another witness stated that they heard gunshots around 1:45 a.m. near the railroad tracks. That afternoon, around 12 p.m., Christopher's body was found near the tracks, wrapped in a comforter. Shannon was failing to respond to calls and text messages all day long. Using the last ping from her cell phone, authorities found her white 4Runner. On January 9th, authorities went to the rental home and found her body in a trash can in the kitchen. There were 5 people who helped commit this sickening crime, 4 of which were convicted to life in prison without parole, and 1 was convicted to the death penalty.
911, what's the location of the emergency? Help me! Yes, what address do you need help? I'm not on an address, I'm on the road, on Myers Road. He's trying to kill me! Which road are you on? Myers Road in Oregon City! Okay, do you have an address? Listen. Be late, come on, get a cop here now! Okay, who's trying to kill you? My husband! He's trying to take a truck! Okay, what? He's trying to kill me! Come on! He's trying to die! And what kind of gun does he have? Ma'am, take a deep breath so I can understand you. Ma'am, I've already got help coming. I need you to tell me wire and what? On plan. I'm on plan. Wire.
Just a minute. I'm walking. He shot me. Okay, you're on fire at Glenview Court? He shot me. Okay, where did he shoot you? In the chest. In the chest? He's over there.
Baby Burger, uno de los casos más traumáticos, atroces y perturbadores de la Deep Web. Todo comienza con una cámara de seguridad apuntando hacia una calle, en donde se observa a una mujer que va caminando con su bebé. Sabemos que es una bebé, porque la madre dio su declaración a la policía de lo que pasó aquella vez. Después, se observa que un automóvil llega y dos sujetos salen rápidamente. Uno de ellos toma a la mujer y la empuja, mientras que el otro sujeto toma a la bebé y la mete dentro del automóvil para así escapar. La toma del video continúa en un bosque. Los sujetos aparecen con un pasamontañas para no ser identificados. Proceden a sacar a la bebé del automóvil para llevarla a lo más profundo del bosque hasta llegar a un lugar donde hay una mesa muy grande. El otro sujeto procede a traer un aparato, el cual en este momento del video está cubierto por una tela amarilla. Uno de los sujetos toma a la bebé y la coloca en la mesa para empezar a abusar de ella, en un terrible acto donde escuchamos los gritos que son desgarradores. El volumen del video sube exageradamente, provocando la risa de uno de los sujetos. Después, procede a darle algunas bofetadas, a lo que comienza a sangrar de la boca. Uno de los sujetos toma a la bebé de los pies, el otro toma el artefacto quitándole la tela amarilla. Vemos que es una máquina para triturar troncos de árboles. Encienden la máquina y el sujeto posa frente a la cámara, dejando caer a la bebé. La cámara hace un enfoque a la caída de la bebé en dicha máquina, a lo que ésta se llena de sangre, igual que las camisas de los dos sujetos. Finalmente, la cámara enfoca a la carne molida que sale de la máquina, para que los dos sujetos comiencen a comerla.
I didn't know this was a true crime case. I would think it was a disturbing horror film. On the morning of the 7th of October 2022, a barefoot woman was running around Excelsior Springs, Missouri, bashing on people's doors. Witnesses describe her looking like she came straight from a horror film and she was calling for help. She'd been beaten, held captive, and SA'd for weeks. The woman was a shocking sight. She was covered in injuries and was wearing a bin bag. Disturbingly, she was gasping for breath as she had a very tight metal collar locked around her neck. It was a nurse who opened the door to her and let her come in. The nurse, and at this point, the woman panicked. She warned her that the captor would kill her and claimed that he had killed her two friends. When police got there, the woman explained that a man called Timothy had captured her the month prior. He'd been holding her hostage this whole time. She said he'd been keeping her locked in the basement and had been SAing her. Disturbingly, she told police that he actually had a young son who lived at the house with him. When Timothy had taken his young son to school the one day, she used it as her opportunity to escape. Police made their way to the home of 39-year-old Timothy Hazlitt Jr. and found the property did in fact have a basement like the woman described. Timothy was arrested and is facing 9 charges, including first-degree kidnapping. He's being held on a $3 million bond and faces 5 life sentences. Before his arrest, police were actually called to his address 3 times. Twice they were asked to do welfare checks, and this was from an employer and also family members. Police have searched his home with cadaver dogs, and they haven't yet released what they know.
What? Look in there, mate. Look in there. What? Look in there.
Mysterious case absolutely does not sit right with me. Someone knows something and has not come forward. On the 12th of July 2015, 18-year-old Tiffany and her parents attended a graduation party in New Jersey. At around 9 p.m., one of Tiffany's friends spoke to her parents and Tiffany had used their debit card without permission. Tiffany initially denied this to her friend, but then did admit this to her mum, Diane, a little bit later. At this point, they were all outside Tiffany's house, and Diane went inside to find her husband. When she returned outside of the house, Tiffany had vanished. Now, they were able to see Tiffany on the deer cameras that they had outside the house. She appears to be walking down the driveway in her normal clothing and white headband. When they tried to find Tiffany, they actually made a terrifying discovery. Her phone was lying on the floor at the bottom of the driveway. Immediately, they knew something was wrong, as Tiffany never had her phone out of her sight. At 11:30 p.m., her family called the police. Little did they know, 27 minutes earlier, Tiffany had been hit by a train. Frustratingly, pretty much straight away, police presumed this death to be a self-unaliving. However, that just didn't seem to fit with the evidence presented. All of Tiffany's family and friends said how much of an upbeat person she was and that she was really happy at the time. She was making plans for the future, and the autopsy also showed that she had a clean toxicology report. Now, in the deer cam footage, she was fully clothed, but when she was found, she was just in her underwear with no shoes on. Upsettingly, 2 weeks after her death, Tiffany's mum actually found her missing trainers and headband more than a mile away from the track. Could someone have murdered Tiffany and then dumped her body on the train tracks to make it look like she did this herself? Tiffany's parents certainly think so. They definitely suspect some foul play was involved.
This is Japan's youngest murdered at only 11 years old. Nevada murdered her best friend.
I honestly think this is one of the most interesting and messed up cases ever. And if you haven't heard about this case, click in that video and she'll give you the gist of what happened. When I first heard about this case, I saw every video, read every article about it. Anything I could find, I saw it or read it. And after so much research about it, I found some things that not a lot of people know about this case. For example, the first thing is this is not Nevada. This is somebody wearing a costume of Nevada. Yes, a costume, like in Halloween, dressing up as an 11-year-old murderer. This is an actual picture of her, one of few pictures that we have of actual Nevada. There's a lot of more pictures of people dressing up as her, but I don't want to show them because some are really gruesome, and I just don't think there's anything cute or funny about dressing up as a murderer. So yeah, some even try to make it sexy. It's just, I don't know. I just think it's weird. Another thing is that, I mean, this is not the real girl, but for the sake of the video, the actual Nevada, that's not her real name. Nevada is not her name. It's just what people started calling her because she had that sweater on when she did the murder. Nevada Tan. Due to Nevada being so young at the time of the murder, her name was not sent to public to keep her safe in her identity. They never know her name because now she's out of jail and she has changed her name, probably changed states. She could be in the US. We don't know. But yeah, we're probably never going to know her name.
This is one of the most disgusting and evil cases I've heard of recently. On the 7th of December 2017, teacher Talma Boinville was desperately trying to make some extra money. She was doing a cleaning job to earn extra money for her family, and the job suited her as her 8-year-old could come along and play while she worked. This was really handy as it meant she didn't have to fork out for childcare. She set out cleaning some holiday homes on the day in question, and her daughter waited in the car. The spot was a lovely scenic place called Kelky Beach. However, instead of walking in on a normal holiday rental to clean, she walked into a nightmare. Stephen Brown and his girlfriend, Haley Dangerand, were in the middle of robbing the place. They were scouring through drawers and wardrobes, hunting for valuables to steal. With Talma walking in, their plan had been foiled. They decided they needed to dispose of their only witness. The evil pair tied up the mother, whose daughter waited unsuspectingly in the car outside. They used a machete, a knife, and a hammer to murder the innocent woman. But the horror was far from over. They exited the holiday home and came across Talma's young daughter waiting in the car. They callously told the young girl, "We killed your mum," and then bound her up and gagged her. Sickeningly, they then took the 8-year-old into the home where they'd killed her mum and left her there tied up. The 2 Australian tourists who were renting the holiday home then came back and found the crime scene. The 2 killers were tracked down hours later in Talma's car, which they'd stolen and driven off in. Haley was actually wearing her victim's earrings at the time. They actually begged for the officers to just shoot them and end their lives, but they wouldn't get away that easily. Talma's husband, Kevin, wasn't actually allowed to see his wife's body due to the extent of her injuries. The autopsy revealed that she'd fought for her life, with many defensive wounds indicating a struggle. Since the murder, Stephen and Haley have both tried to blame each other. Stephen was found guilty of second-degree murder and apparently showed no emotion as the verdict was read out. Haley is currently awaiting trial.
Now that it's summertime, here are 3 of the scariest theme park accidents I've ever heard of. These stories are ordered to get more intense as it goes on, so if the first story is too much for you, then you probably don't want to stick around for the third. On June 21st, 2007, 13-year-old Caitlin Lassiter went to Six Flags of Kentucky. While she was here, she decided to go on the Superman drop ride. This is the kind of ride that lifts you up really high into the air and then it drops you down really fast. However, when their car got to the top, a cable snapped and became undone. This cable became wrapped around Caitlin's throat and feet. She was able to untangle the cord from around her neck, but she wasn't able to get to her feet before the ride dropped, and both of her feet were pulled off. They were able to attach one, but she did end up becoming an amputee. On June 2nd, 2015, the Smiler roller coaster in the UK was having several problems, and one of the test cars got stuck in the middle of the track. However, the employees hadn't communicated with each other that they had added a 5th car, so everyone thought there were 4. So when they saw all 4 cars at the station ready to go, they assumed that the test was done. They then loaded a car full of passengers and sent it down the track, not realizing that a car was already sitting stationary in the middle. The car with passengers inside rear-ended the empty car, resulting in serious injuries. The 2 girls that were sitting in the front of the car had to have their legs amputated. And the horror of this was all made worse because it took emergency services 4 to 5 hours to reach them as everybody was sitting mangled on this roller coaster.